Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel Dr. Srinivas Medical Concepts and my FB page Dr. Srinivas Concepts. This is Dr. Srinivas, neurologist from Andhra Pradesh, India. I am also the medical author of the book Focused Neurology. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting and fascinating topic, emotion. So I think everybody will be interested in this topic because this is a very fascinating topic, emotion. So what is emotion? Emotion is any feeling state associated with autonomic changes. So emotion is any feeling state associated with autonomic changes. So what are the components of emotion? As I said, it's a feeling, a state of feeling. So it could be fear, it could be joy. It is associated with behavior, the second component. For example, if you're angry, you may start shouting at others. If you're afraid of a snake, you may start running. So it is associated with behavioral changes. And because of that, there are physiological autonomic changes. When you are stressed, your pulse rate increases, your BP increases, you start sweating. So the components of emotion are one, the feeling, the behavior and the physiologic changes. What are the basic different kind of emotions? There are basically 7 different kinds of emotions. It could be enjoyable, rewarding, or it could be aversive. The first emotion is seeking. Enthusiastic, you want to be appreciated. So that is seeking. The second is rage or anger. The third is fear. And I believe this is one of the most important types of emotion. Fear is very important as compared to other emotions for survival. Even if you see the evolution, when we go back to our old civilization, and even when you see animals, the deer, if it wants to survive from the lion, it has to have the fear complex and run away. So fear is very important, especially for survival. So of all these types of emotions, fear is one of the most important emotions, and that's why a separate organ, amygdala, has been allocated only for fear emotion, the fear type of response. Then we have lust, sexual feelings towards the other gender. We have the emotion of care, panic, sadness, and play, the joyous nature. So there are so many emotions, 7 types of emotions, but one of the most important emotions of all these is fear. In fact, it is very important for the survival. Right. Are there any advantages of these emotions? Any advantage of anxiety? Yes, there is an advantage. It's known as Yerkes-Dodson's law. Yerkes-Dodson's law. According to this law, as the anxiety increases, so also your performance. So you need to have an examination. You need to be stressed for the examination. So when you're stressed, when there is an exam, you get stressed and you start reading more. Your performance increases. If there's no exam, you're not going to read, you're not going to get stressed, and your performance is going to be suboptimal. So in order to enhance your performance, you need to feel stress. So as the stress increases, the performance also increases. But up to a certain point, beyond which the stress decreases the performance. So you must have seen the athletes also. Before they run, they are really stressed up. They have that adrenaline surge, and then they do well, they perform well. So there should be stress, but if the stress levels goes beyond a certain point, the performance goes down. So if you're not prepared for the exam and there's too much of stress, you've not read, your performance is going to diminish. So you have to get stressed up, but that should be in the optimal level. So the more the stress, the better the performance up to a certain level, beyond which the stress decreases the performance. This is a fantastic law known as Yerkes-Dodson's law. Right. Now let's see the functional neuroanatomy concerned with emotions. Basically, the prefrontal lobe and the limbic system are concerned with emotions. So we'll go one by one. The first is the orbitofrontal cortex. The orbitofrontal cortex is basically concerned with hypersexuality. It is concerned with sexuality. In fact, the three important and common causes of hypersexuality are head injury, cerebral hemorrhage, and Parkinson's patients who are on dopaminergic drugs. So orbitofrontal cortex is very important for sexuality and hypersexuality. The second is the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, which is important for memory. Then we have the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. What it does is that it dampens amygdala. Amygdala is responsible for fear. Therefore, ventromedial cortex from prefrontal cortex dampens fear, and they do not have the fear complex. So the fear comes down. So all these three, orbitofrontal cortex, ventromedial prefrontal cortex, dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, all come under the umbrella of prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is very important for socialization, being friendly with everyone. But very interesting thing happened in the past. Very important example how we can understand the functions of the prefrontal lobe. There was a person called as Phoenix Cage. He was a very friendly person. He was a very social person, but he was working in this railroad. His job was to work near the railroad, but unfortunately what happened, there was an accident wherein a railroad went and pierced his prefrontal cortex. After that, the things changed dramatically. He was no more the same Phoenix Cage. He became totally isolated, secluded, and he was not mixing with others. This goes to prove that prefrontal cortex is very essential for socializing. Right. The other components for emotion is the nucleus accumbens. Nucleus accumbens is very important, especially when you enjoy music. When you listen to music, you really enjoy it. It gives you a lot of pleasurable feelings. It is because the nucleus accumbens is getting stimulated. In fact, endorphins start getting released, the nucleus accumbens gets stimulated, and therefore when you listen to lovely music, you get a pleasurable effect. That is because of the nucleus accumbens being stimulated. The other organs are the ventral pallidum, anterior cingulate. Amygdala is very, very important. I'll be talking about it in a few minutes. Especially for fear, amygdala is very, very important. Then we have the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus integrates the autonomic, emotional, and endocrine systems and is basically concerned with homeostasis. So hypothalamus is very important for maintaining homeostasis. Then we have the septum nucleus, that is also concerned with hypersexuality. It is concerned with pleasure, reward, and reinforcement. Then the other organs which are concerned with emotion are the hippocampus. Hippocampus is especially important for episodic memory. We all know about a very interesting example, the HM patient. HM patient had both the hippocampus removed because of controlling the epilepsy. But unfortunately what happened is that his seizures got controlled, but he developed episodic memory impairment. So what happened is that this HM patient, when he was asked to draw, he drew well. And the next day when he was asked what he drew, he couldn't remember because his episodic memory was completely impaired. Because his episodic memory was impaired, he was drawing well, but he does not remember what he has drawn. Then we have the parahippocampus, then we have the mammillary body. Mammillary body is also is important for memory, especially in vitamin B1 deficiency, thiamine deficiency, Wernicke-Korsakoff psychosis. This mammillary body basically gets impaired. So all these, the downstream 5 are part of the limbic system. The anterior cingulate, amygdala, hypothalamus, septal nuclei, hippocampus, mammillary body. But why is this named the limbic system? Limbus means border. It is a border between the cortex and diencephalon. That's why it's known as a limbic system. So limbic system is basically concerned with emotion intermingled with memory. So the two important functional neuroanatomic portions of emotions are one, the prefrontal cortex, and second, the limbic system. Right. I said that we have good neuroanatomical substrates for emotion, but is there any concrete evidence to say that there is definite emotional pathway? Yes, we do have concrete evidence to say that there's a definite emotional pathway. For example, we can take the example of supranuclear facial palsy. There are two types of supranuclear facial palsy. One, the voluntary supranuclear facial palsy. Second, the emotional supranuclear facial palsy. When there is voluntary supranuclear facial palsy, the lesion could be anywhere above pons, infarct or hemorrhage, or it could be anything. What happens is that in the supranuclear facial palsy, the lower part of the face gets affected. But in voluntary supranuclear facial palsy, they cannot move the lower part of the face on command. But when you ask them to smile, they smile well. That goes to prove that there's a separate emotional pathway. If you take the other way around, in supranuclear emotional facial palsy, the lower part of the face gets affected, but here the emotional pathway gets affected. So example, the thalamic infarct. So when you ask to smile, they can't. When they smile, the lower part does not move, but on command it moves. So this goes to prove that there are two separate pathways for the lower part of the face to move. One, the voluntary pathway, second is the emotional pathway. So there is a definite emotional pathway. This has been concretely proved by this supranuclear facial palsy, having on one side emotional component, the other side the voluntary component. Right. I said the memory and emotions are interlinked. Basically for memory, we have the hippocampus, but hippocampus, as I said earlier, is basically for episodic memory. Then we have the amygdala. Amygdala is responsible for the emotional memory. Anything associated with emotion, you remember it better, and this goes to amygdala. You might have had a traumatic experience in your childhood. You remember it that better, and this goes to amygdala, the emotional memory. Or child abuse, again they remember it better. Post-traumatic stress disorder, they remember it better, because all these emotional memory, the memories associated with emotion, go to the amygdala. So what happened is that Pepys designed a circuit by his name, Pepys circuit, which is the circuit which is meant for the emotions. So Pepys circuit basically consists cingulate, hippocampus, hypothalamus, the anterior thalamus, fornix, and mammillary body. So this is a Pepys circuit for emotion. It was agreed upon at that particular time. But later they realized the importance of amygdala. Amygdala was not present in the original description of Pepys circuit. So later they've added amygdala. So the credit goes to Maclean, and therefore it is known as Maclean circuit. He realized the importance of amygdala and added amygdala to this Pepys circuit. So now this goes by the name Maclean circuit, where they realize the importance of amygdala. Right, I've been stressing on amygdala. So let me talk about the central role of amygdala. Amygdala is basically for fear, the fear of, in fear and emotions, of the emotional component, fear is most important and amygdala is responsible. Right, how this fear component gets into the body. Suppose there is a stimulus, imagine there is a snake. So it enters the body and then it goes to the thalamus, sensory thalamus, without going to the sensory cortex. So this is an emergency pathway. So when it goes to the sensory thalamus without going to the sensory cortex, this is known as an emergency pathway, and from sensory thalamus it goes to the amygdala. This is an emergency pathway, but it's a suboptimal pathway. There are only few synapses. It is an emergency situation. For example, you see a snake, you want to just run away. You do not want to analyze whether it's a snake or a rope. So it's an emergency path. There are two pathways. One is an emergency pathway which goes straight to the thalamus, from the thalamus to the amygdala. Second, you have the slow pathway, a roadmap of slow pathway, which is an optimal pathway. The emotion goes to the sensory cortex, and from the sensory cortex it goes to the amygdala. So this pathway tries to analyze whether it is a snake or a rope. If it's a snake, let me run away. If it's a rope, why should I run away? Let me stand. So this is a slow pathway. So basically, any emotion, especially fear, when it enters into the body, there are two types of reactions. One is the fast reaction, which goes directly to the thalamus, from the thalamus to the amygdala, but it is suboptimal. Second is the slow pathway, very optimal pathway. The emotion goes to the sensory cortex, analyzes, and then goes to the amygdala. So finally, what happens, whether it is a slow pathway or emergency pathway, they go to the lateral nucleus of the thalamus. From the lateral nucleus of the thalamus, it goes to the central nucleus of the thalamus, from the amygdala, and then you get the responses: increased pulse rate, increased heart rate, freezing of the muscles, and sweating. Right. I said the pathway goes to the thalamus, and then from thalamus it goes to the amygdala. In thalamus, we have the lateral geniculate nucleus for vision. We have the medial geniculate nucleus for auditory learning, for the conduction of the auditory pathway. Here again, there's a very interesting experiment. It is similar to the Pavlovian experiments. We all know the Pavlovian experiment. There was the dog, there was a bell, and then they served food. Once they were ringing bell, it was an unconditioned stimulus. Then they were placing the food. So this was an unconditioned stimulus. But after some time, the dog began to associate the ringing of the bell with the food. And therefore, even when the food was not served, when the bell started ringing, the dog started salivating in anticipation of the food. Now the unconditioned stimulus has become a conditioned stimulus. They have conditioned it. Like that, we have a fear emotion also being conditioned. What they did is that they put they put a rabbit in a cage, and then they made a sound. The rabbit turned and was looking towards the sound. But then after a few days, after the sound was given, they gave electric shock to the cage, and the rabbit was trembling with fear after feeling the shock. So this started continuing. A sound comes and electric shock comes. A sound was an unconditioned stimulus which was associated with the shock. After some time, they stopped giving shock, but whenever the sound came, it started associating sound with the shock and started trembling with fear. So they realized that even fear can be conditioned. Now the sound which was initially unconditioned, now they conditioned it so much so that the rabbit started getting fear. So even the emotion of fear can be conditioned. This was beautifully and elegantly explained and proved by this wonderful experiment. Right. I said the amygdala is very, very important for emotions, especially fear. So how do we prove it? So they did an experiment where they removed both the amygdala and the temporal lobes, Kluver and Bucy, and therefore the name goes as Kluver-Bucy syndrome. So what they did is that when they removed the amygdala and temporal lobe, they noticed few points. One, there was completely absence of the emotion of fear. The monkeys which were not friendly with snakes, they become very friendly with snakes. So the fear complex was gone. The emotion of fear was gone. Second, they had the compulsion to attend to all oral and sensory stimuli, and the monkeys were taking everything through their mouth, hyperorality. In fact, their dietary habit also changed. They are basically vegetarians, but they noticed that they became non-vegetarians and started taking a non-vegetarian food also. They had hypersexuality, so much so that the dogs, the monkeys, they started cooperate with the chicken. And then they had psychic blindness. This is very interesting. Psychic blindness. The temporal lobe, especially the occipitotemporal lobe and occipitoparietal lobe, produces visual agnosias. When the occipitotemporal lobe, this occipitotemporal lobe is concerned with what kind of visual agnosia. Occipitoparietal lobe is concerned with where type of visual agnosia. So if occipitoparietal lobe is sectioned, they have problems with the where. They cannot look at the space and see it in its entirety. They miss forest for the trees. They can see bits of pieces here and there, but they cannot see it in entirety. The where goes off. If occipitotemporal cortex gets affected, it produces a what type of visual agnosia? They can see objects, but they cannot give meaning to the objects. For example, if occipitotemporal cortex is affected in human beings, especially the fusiform gyrus, they can recognize the face, as a human face, but they cannot identify that particular human face. They can say a face as a human face, but they really do not know the particular individual's human face. So, akin to that, because the temporal lobe is removed, in Kluver-Bucy syndrome, they develop psychic blindness. They can see, but they cannot give meaning to what they've seen, because along with amygdala, the temporal lobe is removed, so the occipitotemporal connections gets affected. Right. Now we have interesting transmitters. We'll talk about the interesting transmitters. Neurotransmitters of emotion. We'll talk about the dopamine. We'll talk about serotonin. We'll talk about the oxytocin and endorphin. Dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter for a reward, for getting appreciated. It is otherwise known as achiever's neurotransmitter. So when this dopamine level is high in you, we feel like achieving something, accomplishing some task and getting recognized. So dopamine is known as a reward hormone or as an achiever's hormone. We all know that dopamine also produces happiness and kinesia, movement. So when the dopamine level is more, we have excessive happiness. So much so that we may become maniac. Example, schizophrenia. They also have hyperkinetic movements. They start hitting others. On the other hand, when the dopamine comes down, example Parkinson's, the happiness comes down, they become depressed and then they cannot move about. They are hypokinetic. So dopamine is basically an achiever's hormone, a reward hormone. So whenever it is present high, they feel like achieving, accomplishing, getting recognized. The second, we have serotonin. Serotonin is a very friendly hormone, pro-social hormone. It likes to maintain friendliness with everyone so that it builds a relationship and then you get a feel-good feeling. In fact, if serotonin level goes down, they become depressed, and therefore we use selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like fluoxetine as an antidepressant to make them more happy. Because selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor inhibits the reuptake of serotonin, there's more serotonin at the synapse, so the more it can act on the postsynaptic receptor and they have happiness. So dopamine is concerned for achieving things, achiever's hormone. Serotonin is concerned with happiness. Then we have oxytocin. It's a love hormone. We see the presence of oxytocin especially when we interact with the opposite gender. The high which we get generally when we interact with the opposite gender is because of oxytocin. It's otherwise known as love hormone. So when someone touches, cuddles or hugs or massages, this oxytocin hormone gets enhanced. So it's known as love hormone. And finally we have the endorphins. It is known as a runner's high. These endorphins are natural pain-killing substances. That is, when the endorphin levels increases, we feel so happy, our pain gets relieved. In fact, when we start walking, exercising or running, these endorphins get increased. And so we feel so happy. There's no pain at all. We enjoy the pleasure. even when you listen to music, in fact, the endorphins go and stimulate the nucleus accumbens, and therefore, when you listen to nice music, we enjoy it. You get a pleasurable effect. The endorphins are also seen in chocolate. So when we eat a lot of chocolates, the endorphins increase and we feel so happy. So these are all the neurotransmitters of emotion: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. So we saw an overview of emotions. We saw the different types of emotions, the functional neuroanatomy of emotions. Most important, the Yerkes-Dodson's law, and we have confirmed the presence of the emotional pathway with an example of supranuclear facial palsy. The slow pathway and the fast pathway for reaction, we need both, because when we see snake, we should run away without analyzing the fast pathway. We need the slow pathway also. We need to analyze whether it is a snake or a rope. So we saw the importance of that and the importance of amygdala by removing it in the form of Kluver-Bucy syndrome, and finally the neurotransmitters. So this is an overview of emotions, such a fascinating topic, and I believe it will be useful for all specialties, all doctors and all the medical personnel, all the paramedics, and in fact the persons who are not related to medicine also, because emotion is such an important feeling that everyone will enjoy knowing about emotion. I really enjoyed giving this lecture on emotion, and I hope you have also enjoyed listening to my lecture on emotion. If you have any suggestions or comments, kindly post onto my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe my YouTube channel, Dr. Srinivas Medical Concepts, and my FB page, Dr. Srinivas Concepts. Thank you. Bye.